At 62, when the whole world believed Elizabeth Montgomery had quietly closed the door on her past, she suddenly broke her silence. A chilling confession like a knife's edge: "If I die tonight, tell them I once loved the men who turned my life into hell." After 62 years of silence, she chose to speak up, about 5 men whose names had quietly dragged her life and career into utter darkness. Why? Who betrayed her? Who shattered the dreams of America's beloved witch? And who raped her twice right on set, a horror she could never forget, not even in her final moments? Let us take you beyond the glittering lights of fame to see how true darkness swallowed Elizabeth Montgomery. Before we name the 5 men who broke her heart, let's revisit the life of Elizabeth Montgomery.
I love it. I think it is probably the most terrifying. You know, what am I doing here? And I wish I could just, set something on fire or go through the floor, anything.
Born on April 15, 1933, in Los Angeles, California, Elizabeth Montgomery was the daughter of a legendary actor. She was born into the spotlight and entered the world of film as a child. But that light was never truly hers. The enormous shadow of her father, a weight she bore her entire life, meant Elizabeth was never allowed to be herself. Then destiny called her name with Bewitched, the sitcom that took 1960s America by storm. With just a twitch of her nose, Elizabeth had the whole nation under her spell. She became America's sweetheart witch, the dream model for millions of families. But while the country laughed along with every scene, Elizabeth's own life was quietly falling apart. 3 marriages shattered like glass in the dark. The first, a gentleman on the surface, but a jealous, controlling man who kept her like an antique behind glass. Less than a year later, he abandoned her for a younger woman. The second, a charming actor who publicly smeared her name, calling her a parasite clinging to his fame. And the last, a director she thought was true love, cheated on her while she was pregnant with their 3rd child, sleeping with a female assistant 20 years her junior. Elizabeth once bitterly asked the American public, "I'm a star for the whole country, so why can't I turn on the lights in my own home?" Do you have an answer for her? But the worst didn't happen in marriage. It happened where passion and art were supposed to thrive, the Hollywood set. Elizabeth Montgomery was hunted like prey, not by wolves, but under studio lights, amid applause, among those who called themselves colleagues. Some toasted with her. Some gave her flowers and acted beside her like soulmates. Then those very people, right in the middle of a scene, crossed the line no one dared to speak of. Not once, but twice. Under the glare of studio lights, in the echo of action, Elizabeth was violated. No one called, "Cut." No one stopped. No one asked, "Are you okay?" To them, it was just acting. But to her, it was a living nightmare. And only at the end of her life, when she finally spoke out, the world was stunned. Those scenes weren't fiction. They were real. A chilling truth buried beneath a television smile for decades. No warning, no explanation, no justification. In a 1989 press conference, Elizabeth confessed, "I didn't fail because I couldn't act. I failed because I was a woman on a man's chessboard, and I dared to play with my mind." And among the hands that held hers after each episode, at least one belonged to the list of 5 men she hated most in her life. The first, Gig Young, the man who nearly turned Elizabeth Montgomery into a cold corpse. They met like a twist of fate, a fate written in blood. She was the enchantress who mesmerized America. He was the Oscar-winning heartthrob who made women swoon. Together, they lit up the red carpet like a dream. But behind the camera flashes lay a night with no dawn. Elizabeth Montgomery married Gig Young, and stepped into hell. A marriage to Gig Young, the man later dubbed by the press as the most dangerous figure in Montgomery's life. What looked like love quickly revealed itself as a trap. Elizabeth had married an addict, a charming man cloaked in endless darkness. Gig Young was addicted not just to alcohol, but to control. Drunk, he screamed like a beast, smashed glasses against the wall, hurled furniture like a storm. Once, simply because Elizabeth had a fever and couldn't leave the house, he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into the living room, like a lifeless doll. Friends often saw the bruises on her arms. But what they couldn't see were the wounds on her soul, the fear etched in her eyes every time the phone rang after midnight. Elizabeth once wrote in her diary, "I don't know what's scarier, when he's drunk or when he's sober." Why didn't a strong woman like Elizabeth just leave? The answer wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of being cast out by Hollywood. And above all, fear of hearing the one sentence she dreaded most from her father, Robert Montgomery, I warned you." And then, just when she thought she had escaped, fate revealed how close she had come to death, if she had stayed just a few months longer. After their divorce, Gig Young married a young woman. Just weeks after the wedding, he pulled the trigger. He shot his wife dead. Then turned the gun on himself. The news crushed Elizabeth. She collapsed, not from grief, but from sheer panic. For the first time, she truly understood, I could have been the one who died. Gig Young, the first man on the list of 5 she hated most. Not just for hitting her, but for leaving behind one terrifying question that haunted her for the rest of her life. If I hadn't left, would I still be alive today? If Gig Young was the nightmare behind closed bedroom doors, the next man was a nightmare bathed in stage lights and camera clicks, a horror that all of Hollywood applauded. The second Cliff Potts. A co-star everyone thought was harmless. But to Elizabeth Montgomery, he wasn't just a colleague. He was a nightmare she carried until the end of her life. They met on set, surrounded by lights, cameras, and scenes that seemed routine. On screen, they were a perfect pair. But after the first take, Elizabeth didn't smile. She lowered her head and rushed to the dressing room without saying a word. Because she knew, something had gone terribly wrong. That scene, no one yelled, "Cut." No one rushed in. Everyone thought it was just powerful acting. But Elizabeth knew better, it was real. Cliff Potts didn't miss a line. He didn't slip. He crossed the line. Pushed too far. Cornered her. Pressed her into a place with no escape. And he knew, within the role, no one could interfere. The second time happened during a special episode. Elizabeth warned the director she was uncomfortable. Her warning was ignored. And then it happened again, those same eyes, the same touch not written in the script. This time, Elizabeth nearly screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the cameras, the shout of action, and the applause. After the second time, Elizabeth never looked at a frame with Cliff Potts again. She refused to rewatch the episode. Refused to speak of it. But her eyes, after that day, never burned with fire again. Only emptiness remained. Cold, like a mirror coated in dust. It wasn't until the very end of her life that she spoke out. In a quiet interview, she confessed, "There are 2 scenes that make me want to throw up when I see them. And there's one man, who took something from me that can never be returned." His name, Cliff Potts, is still praised for his realistic performances. But no one knew, the price of that realism was a soul suffocated beneath applause. And Elizabeth, she never forgot. Not because of the pain, but because no one ever said sorry. If this story makes you as angry as it made us, leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe, because some truths are so dark, you won't believe your ears. The third William Asher, the traitor hiding behind the titles of husband and director. They were once television's golden couple. She was the star who captivated the nation, he was the mastermind behind it all. Together, they created Bewitched, a small screen legend. A picture-perfect family, 3 beautiful children, a mansion in Beverly Hills, and a glow of fame that seemed eternal. But Elizabeth Montgomery didn't realize, she was living in a scene directed by her own husband, and the script was never hers. William Asher didn't just direct television. He directed Elizabeth's life, with sweet words, subtle control, and velvet-wrapped lies. Behind the lights of the set, Elizabeth slowly discovered, her husband never stopped casting new supporting roles, even within their marriage. Strange women strolling down studio hallways. Sudden business trips. Late-night calls that always went unanswered. Then one day in Malibu, she walked into the bathroom and found him with his arms wrapped around a supporting actress. "Don't make a scene, darling. This is Hollywood. Everyone plays like this," William chuckled, as if it meant nothing. But what shattered Elizabeth was the phone call that night. She was pregnant with their second child. A young, chirpy female voice answered, "He's in the shower. Can you call back later, ma'am?" In that instant, Elizabeth's heart broke like crystal. She realized, her love had never been directed. It was just a glittering prop in the game of fame. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't make a scene. She quietly walked away, as if the dream had never existed. But behind her, were the torn fragments of her youth, ripped apart without mercy. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you had to lie to yourself, just to keep the dream alive? Elizabeth Montgomery did. And the price was her entire youth. The fourth, not a husband. Not a co-star. But her own father. Robert Montgomery, famed actor, Hollywood's model of manhood. To the world, he was a gentleman, suave, handsome, talented. But to Elizabeth, he was the greatest fear of her life. From childhood, she lived in his shadow. Every word, every step, controlled. He chose her roles. He edited her lines, her smile, even how she sat during interviews. Elizabeth wasn't a daughter, she was a prototype to be corrected into perfection. No hugs. No encouragement. Just cold commands, not good enough. Do it again. When Bewitched made Elizabeth a star, he didn't call. But when she divorced, when scandals hit, when tabloids swarmed, he sent a single line, "I warned you." Elizabeth once said, "I became a good actress because I spent my whole life playing the perfect daughter." He didn't hit her. He didn't yell. He didn't abandon her. But he was the first man who made her believe she wasn't worthy of love. And that is why he ranks fourth on the list, a name no one expected, but the one who left the deepest wound. The fifth, he didn't hold her hand. He didn't share her bed. But he strangled her career with a single, cold phone call. The TV network executive, the man with life and death power over Bewitched. He once toasted when ratings soared. Once called her the heart of the series. But behind her back, he said, she's taking too much control. Elizabeth rewrote lines, proposed scenes, and fought to keep the show's quality from slipping. But to him, a beautiful woman who dared to speak up was a threat. So without warning, he gave the order. Episodes featuring her. Fewer lines. Key scenes. Handed to supporting actors. By the final season, Elizabeth was vanishing from the very series she helped create. No explanation. No defense. Not even a goodbye. Years later, a former employee confessed, she embarrassed the boss in a meeting. And just one bruised ego was enough to kill an entire career. Elizabeth once said, "No one killed me. They just dimmed the lights until I disappeared." The fifth man, he didn't rage. He didn't threaten. He just gave the order. And America's beloved witch faded into a shadow on her own screen. Elizabeth Montgomery lived, loved, trusted, and was brought to her knees by the very people she once called family. 5 names. 5 scars that would never heal. If you've ever smiled at that legendary nose twitch, take a moment to think about the woman behind that smile. And if you have something to say to her, leave it below. Elizabeth deserves to be heard. Even if it's only after the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss stories that hurt more than you could ever imagine.